Hello everyone, it's Davey Mooney, coming to you from UNT, where I run the jazz guitar program. I'm a Benedetto artist, Sunnyside Records artist. Got my Sunnyside discography up here. Live at National Sawdust is the latest, although there's a new one coming out June 9th. Benign Strangers, Hope of Home, Perrier Street. I've got a couple Mel Bay books, Personalizing Jazz Vocabulary. The latest is Into the Labyrinth, An Anatomy of Position Playing for Jazz Guitar. And we got one more week of winter break before the spring 2023 semester is upon us. I just got back from the Jazz Education Network convention in Orlando. I did a clinic presentation on jazz phrasing. Maybe I'll do a video on that at some point, but I'm sort of trying to formulate another book idea. Now I'm going to have to get another music stand for these videos. But yeah, that's not what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about the tune Invitation. Great jazz standard, one of my faves, written by Bronislaw Kaper. I think I'm saying his name right. It's one of those names that I see written a lot, but I don't really hear people say. I guess there was a film called Invitation. I was looking on Wikipedia from the early 50s. I've never seen it. And, you know, Bronislaw, he also wrote Green Dolphin Street, another famous jazz standard. And he was a very respected film composer in the sort of golden era of Hollywood. And there's a lot of recordings, jazz recordings of this song. I'm going to talk about a few of them. I guess I first heard it, got to be honest, y'all, I learned it from the real book, probably, in conjunction with just people playing it around at the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts in the 90s. And I used to hear Steve Masakowski play it a lot at Snug Harbor. And it's on his Live at Snug Harbor album from 1997 that I don't believe is on streaming services. It's not on Apple Music, but I see some of those tunes up on YouTube. And man, it's one of my favorite versions of that song. It's Bill Huntington on bass and Johnny Vodakovich on drums. And just the groove of it, everything, the whole vibe of that recording. It's one of my favorite of Steve's recordings. And it's on John Coltrane's record, standard Coltrane. It's like late 50s, 58, 57. Joe Henderson, Tetragon, about 10 years later. I wanted to find a vocal version, and there's a bunch of them, but I came across a Rosemary Clooney recording with a Nelson Riddle arrangement, and I just love, when I see the Nelson Riddle name, I always want to check out the harmony and check out what he did, because he's one of the greatest arrangers, if not the greatest, for that style, for those vocalists like Sinatra and Rosemary Clooney and other folks. She does it in E minor, which is kind of interesting because usually it's in C minor. And there isn't as much variation on the harmony on this tune. There's also a Bill Evans recording on, is it called Intuition, the duo with Eddie Gomez? And there's a million recordings. I could talk about them all day, but I'll just talk a little bit about the few that I mentioned. So most people play it in C minor, other than that vocal. I mean, obviously vocalists do their own thing for the key that's good for them, but the idea is you have this sort of modal, this mixture of fairly long stretches on one chord, but also some 2/5s and some functional harmony. So you have like C minor, C minor, C minor, and sometimes you get an F7 before like a B flat 7. Sometimes there'll be some like an F minor before the B flat 7, but most of the versions I was hearing it's pretty much just C minor, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4, C minor, 4, 6, 2, 3, 4, and a B flat 7 with at least a sharp 11. The Nelson Riddle, he's got some crazy chord going on there. I was trying to pick out all the notes, but like with the textures, I think it was definitely like of course he's in another key, but it was a pretty gnarly, like diminished kind of vibe. There was maybe like a G triad and an E triad on there. A lot of magical notes going on, but I remember the Masakowski, and what does he do? He goes... B flat 7, and like A flat, E natural, and G, which is kind of cool. And then it goes to E flat minor and kind of does the same thing. playing. So you have about, it's almost like it's 8 bars in that C minor key center, but you have like 4 bars of C minor, 6 bars of C minor, and then 2 bars of the B flat 7 altered. And maybe you would get an F7 right before the B flat 7, or maybe then F minor. But I think at its most basic, it's 6 bars of C minor and then 2 bars of a B flat 7, where the melody is the 13, but then there's usually a sharp 11. Then you get E flat minor and the same kind of melody, so it goes up a minor third, the 5-1, before it. Oops, and then so you get a similar thing where you go down to D flat 7. So E flat minor, 4 2 2 3 4 3 2 3 4 2 3 4 5 2 3 4 6 2, maybe A flat 7, and 2 bars of D flat 7 sharp 11. And that tempo's around where Joe Henderson does it. The train version is real slow, ballad. Rosemary Clooney's a ballad. Masakowski has a cool kind of, I feel like it's similar to the Joe Henderson tempo, but it's a nice kind of New Orleans groove. I encourage y'all to check it out. It's like second line meets the Bill Evans trio, some of the stuff that Bill Huntington is doing. Kind of straight eighths and swing at the same time. Anyway, I love it. It's one of my favorite records. But right, so that takes you up to the bridge, which I always think of as, I learned this song pretty close to when I learned Cherokee. So I always feel like Invitation is like the minor key Cherokee bridge, because you start off with D flat minor, F sharp 7, to B flat minor, whereas Cherokee would be like, would go to B major, so it's the same 2-5, but it goes minor. And I love the melody where you have, and I use that idea sometimes when I'm improvising. It's like a 2-5 idea. So you have D flat minor 9, and you got like what note is that? A flat, like the 5th, and the natural 9, and then on the dominant chord on the F sharp 7 or G flat 7, you just move those down a half step, and you get like G natural and D natural. That little figure moves down in half steps. Then you got same thing, B minor, E7, A minor. Then one more time to G minor. So D flat minor, F sharp 7, B minor, D minor, E7, A minor, A minor 7, D7, G minor, and then this. And here's where there's a little bit of variation on different versions. I learned it as you have a E flat 7 sharp 11 to like a D7 flat 9 to G7 back to C minor. And Rosemary Clooney, I'll put it in, keep it in this key, although she's in the key of E minor, so it's a little different, but they go, they do the E flat 7, and then they do like a measure of A7, like the tritone sub, then the D7 and the G7. And Coltrane does something like that too. It's funny because it's so slow. I feel like he stays on the E flat 7 for a longer time. It gives you the A7 right there, then D7, G7, C minor. So rather than the Clooney one, it would be like E flat 7 for a bar, A7 for a bar, D7 for a bar, G7 for a bar. Train gives you like E flat 7 for a bar, for another bar, then A7, 2 beats of D7, 2 beats of G7, C minor. Although it's from those old records, Prestige, I often feel like not everybody got the memo on what the chord changes were, and I'm sure they they ran through those things. They didn't really rehearse, and so that's what it sounds like they're playing on the head. Although I'm not sure if I guess is that Red Garland and it's Paul Chambers. He plays some really cool like rhythmic ideas on the head too, like a very sort of melodic bass line. It's worth checking out. Let's see, Masakowski does that, Joe Henderson, he changes it up a little bit. just in the sense that he makes it a E flat major 7 sharp 11 rather than a dominant, which really kind of jumped out at me. I hadn't listened to that version in a while, but you have and Don Friedman on piano, D7, G7, C minor. Then the last sort of A is interesting because it has a cool little coda. Starts off the same. F7, B flat 7, and E flat minor. Then right to what most people do is they go to B7 sharp 11, then an F7 or an F minor 7 flat 5. People do different things there. B flat 7 to E flat minor major 7, and then D7, G7, C minor. So it's cool. It kind of resolves in E flat minor, although the tune's sort of in C minor. Interesting kind of relationship there, because I guess E flat major and C minor are pretty closely related, right? Or very closely related, relative major and minor, and so somehow just making the resolving in E flat minor instead of major has a kind of mysterious vibe to it. But so that last section, I guess I always think of this as kind of like A bridge, sort of like ABC form. It's interesting. I guess I should have counted the bars. I didn't really count them. I guess it's 16, or you get 8 in the C minor, and then 8 in the E flat minor, then the bridge, and then this last bit. 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4. You get 8 bars again. B flat 7, E flat minor, 2, 2, 3, 4, B7, for 2 bars. What am I doing? Sorry, F minor. So you get another 8 bars there. It just resolves a little differently. And Joe Henderson changes it up there. So he goes, I wasn't aware of this until just a little while ago when I went back and checked this version. I hadn't heard it in a long time, but he did in the last A. Oops, I'm having my forgot to mute my thing over there. It's these videos are really live, you guys. Things happen, weird little noises. I forget how many bars the songs are. Where was I? I was talking about Joe Henderson. Yeah, the way he does that last part, he does he does all that, but then he goes to E flat minor, and he doesn't do the B7. He just stays on E flat minor. Still E flat minor, the F minor 7 flat 5 or F7 altered, the B flat 7, and then he plays E flat major at the end, which is kind of interesting, and then turns around back to C minor. I'm not sure why, again, I didn't listen to every version, because there's so many, I don't think I'd even capable of listening to every version of this tune, but I'm not sure where that came from. I think he maybe just came up with it on his own. And the Bill Evans version, it sounds like they stretch out that last part a little bit longer, maybe a little longer on those last 2 5 chords in E flat minor. Again, you can, each one of these tunes you can really spend forever on. There's so many versions and so many slight variations. Naturally, when people make a record of the song, they want to add their little thing to it. But I like the Masakowski version because he just sort of, it's a rhythmic, it's the New Orleans modern jazz vibe with all the groove things that you would imagine, but it's very subtle and it's still real modern jazz. And playing on the tune, you could kind of go Dorian, C Dorian, and the B flat 7. You could kind of think of it too. I think you could play F minor, then a B flat 7 to E flat minor. You kind of make it a 2-5. I mean, the B flat 7 is kind of could be B flat 7 sharp 11. You could go like Lydian dominant. You could play F melodic minor. I think might sound cool, into E flat minor, or you could probably alter it. Although I would wait. That's one of those chords where there's two bars on the B flat 7, right? Theoretically, unless you want to make the first bar be like F minor and then B flat 7. But if I'm going to go B flat 7 the whole time, I probably wouldn't fully alter it in the sense of I wouldn't play flat 13s and put all that gnarliness on it until like the last second before it went to E flat minor, because I kind of feel like that G natural is important because it's the melody. So if I'm going, so I'm in C minor, so this is like the A section. So 1, 2, 3, 4. C minor, right? B flat 7. It's like I talk about in Personalizing Jazz Vocabulary, having those 5 8th note resolution cells, and not, which you can do a number of different ways. I can do a tritone sub, that was kind of a, I guess that's super Locrian, or there's a lot of ways to think about it. On B flat 7, those notes, 3 and 4 and 1, which is the resolution. It's kind of a B flat augmented triad. You can think of it as like a B minor, so minor up a half step from the B flat 7. A lot of different ways to think about it, but I'm waiting for those last 2 beats before I really alter the chord and get away from this sound, which is so kind of nice. And that's the maybe the common tone that gets you from C minor, B flat 7, and then it goes to E flat minor, that G natural. And then a similar thing going to the bridge, although D flat 7, it's not a 2-5-1. It's going from D flat 7 to D flat minor. So I wouldn't do a similar thing. I wouldn't put a flat 13 sharp 5 on that D flat 7 necessarily. I usually leave that for, or a tritone sub. I might put a tritone sub, but I usually leave the flat 13 for when, again, every time I make these statements and then I'm back in my mind, I'm thinking of times when I would put it on there in other contexts, but usually, unless it's going 5-1, that's kind of when I put the flat 13. So D flat 7 go to D flat minor, not so much. But so the bridge, just 2 5s. Although it's not D flat minor 7 flat 5. It's very much like D flat minor 9 to F sharp 7, altered with the flat 13 to B minor 9. So it's kind of an interesting progression. Whoops. And then E flat 7, if you make it a dominant there, it's kind of calling out for Lydian dominant, B flat melodic minor. If you want to think of it as a 7-note scale, I mean, I guess you could also play off of that upper structure, of sort of an A augmented triad. D flat 7, D flat 7 flat 9, or you could probably play D minor 7 flat 5, G7 C minor, like when you're blowing on the tune there. In those contexts, I don't need to necessarily, although I could do D7, I could be some kind of D7 with some funk on it. Maybe D half whole diminished, maybe like a D triad to an A flat triad, and a G7 to a D flat 7 triad to C minor. That would be a cool resolution. And then, same deal for the first bit, and then you get to E flat minor, then B7. And it's almost like you're going E flat minor, E flat Dorian, to E flat minor 7 flat 5, right? Because B7 sharp 11 from the third is E flat minor 7 flat 5. It's always good to think about the upper structure and think about the chords at least from the third. for a second before going G7 back to C. I feel like that's such a cool, interesting modulation there. And yeah, I've never played on it with the Joe Henderson chords of going to E flat major at the end. That would be strange. I just spent so many years doing it this way. One other thing before I play some choruses on the song, chord voicing wise, there's a cool thing that I learned watching Steve Masakowski play this. And I sort of learned all my chord voicings from watching him and watching other people play. I was never as systematic as some folks, and some of my students here, they use the drop system, and they get deep into it, and I'm very impressed and very blown away. But I sort of reached the point where I kind of do chords my own way. I do some real sort of straight ones, if I'm playing F7. A lot of the time I'll just do that. But what Steve does there that's kind of interesting, if I remember correctly, on the last part of the song, there's the B7, and then he would go, so these voicings on the middle three strings there. So for the F7, you're playing you're basically playing this, like an F13, but putting those three notes on this middle set of strings. And then for the B flat 7, you're basically playing just like a sharp 9, but just playing it on those middle strings. Sounds kind of cool. Especially this one, you get this separation between the chord and the melody note where it almost sounds like kind of a keyboard. And then this, for E flat minor 9, is, again, you're basically going. But it, somehow, I don't know, it looks kind of cool. I mean, it looks cool the other way too, but it's cool to have those higher notes. That separation between the chord and the melody note on top. I mean, I think it's kind of like a Lenny Bro type idea. Although Jim Hall would play these chords a lot too. Quartal voicings in fourths, and then putting having the third or the seventh in the bass as the lowest note. So it's F7, right? F13 it's got the 7 in the bass, E flat, and then B flat 7 sharp 9 with the third in the bass, the D in the bass. Flat minor 9 with the 6/9, I guess, with the third in the bass. So it's G flat. And then you could go right. You're here. That could still be D7. You could keep the upper structure as a D7 sharp 9, and then for G7 to C minor. So those little figures. That's how I use those voicings a lot to comp for myself, like in a trio context. Just trying to mimic the stuff on that Live at Snug Harbor record, which you all should check out. So anyway, I want to play a few choruses on this song, explore some of these ideas, and yeah, really cool. One of my favorite standards, interesting harmony, interesting form, and so many great versions to check out. All right.